Dune Part 2. Is it the best sci-fi movie ever made? Welcome back to my YouTube channel. I am your host, Seth Warren. This is War of the Movies. Today is a very special one. Special kind of video. I just got back from the cinema, my local cinema. Just got done watching the second installment of the Dune franchise, Dune Part 2. Before I get into the review of Dune Part 2, I want to give you my thoughts on Dune Part 1. I thought it was good. Didn't think it was great. It's an average movie. A little slow and a little boring at times, kind of a hard second watch, for sure. So I give it around a 7.3 out of 10. That's what I would give that Dune Part 1. But now watching the second one, and we'll get into it later, it is necessary for that movie to be what it is. So this one can shine like it shines. Without further ado, let's get into the pros of Dune Part 2. First thing that jumps out to you is near perfection cinematography. The cinematography, the way it is shot, the way it looks is on a whole nother level. This could be a little bit recency biased setting in on me. That is one of the better looking movies I've ever seen. The setting that it's in, of course, the set designs and how beautiful that is. CGI is on a whole nother level as well. But I'm talking about the camera angles, the leading lines in the symmetry of the shot is just brilliant. It's absolutely phenomenal, near perfection in this movie. The second pro, from another technical aspect of the movie, the sound production is on a whole nother level. It really is. It's different. I didn't even see this movie in IMAX, and it was filling the whole room. It felt like you were immersed into this movie. When you get to the credits at the end, you see who did the score. I didn't know who did the score going into the movie. Of course, it's Hans Zimmer. Hans Zimmer is the greatest of all time at what he does. Put together a score together for an epic movie like he can. He does it again. Dune Part 2, one of the better scores I've ever heard. Legit. I'm not saying that just because it's recency biased. It is legit that good. The third pro. I got a lot of pros here. The world building in this movie. Even last movie, Dune Part 1 does a great job world building. This franchise is becoming one of my favorite worlds to watch. It has to do with cinematography, that has to do with set design, that has to do with the setting, where they shot it, and the relationships between the characters and how it's affecting the world and the spice, how it's affecting everybody and certain characters. I mean, the world building, again, on a whole nother level. What separates this movie from the first one, I think, too, as well, is the pacing. I mean, there is no slow or boring parts in this one. It is boom, boom, boom. It doesn't stop, paced so well. I saw a comment on a TikTok video that I'm going to make a YouTube video about, and it was like, this 3-hour movie felt like 45 minutes. I couldn't agree more. Part 1 waited so long to get in some of the action parts, right? It waited so long to get into the thickness of the story. But this one, it is right off the fucking rip, dude. Excuse my language, but this movie is out of control. This movie doesn't know chill. This movie has no chill. This movie is non-stop at your throat, on the edge of your seat. I had a bucket of popcorn. I was eating it, and then I found myself 20 minutes later still having the bucket of popcorn. I forgot to eat. And for me, look at me. You think I forget to eat often? It's brilliant. It's that good. It's that action-packed. It's that well-paced. It's good. It's better than good. It's great. I think Rebecca Ferguson in Part 1 was good, but this one, she I think was my favorite performance out of the whole movie. Believe it or not, The Sleepers, with Timothée Chalamet, Zendaya being the main vocal point in this movie, Austin Butler being another main vocal point in this movie. I think Rebecca Ferguson was brilliant. Absolutely perfect performance. I think I wouldn't change a single thing about her performance, and I think they wrote her character arc in this movie very, very well as well. Another actor I want to give props, Austin Butler. You don't really get to see him for the first hour of the movie, but the next 2 hours he is in it, you kind of like him a little bit. He's so fucking... It's one of those characters that's so weird and you don't really understand him, but you just kind of like him for some reason. I don't know. The opening scene that Austin Butler character gets introduced just slits a woman's throat for no reason. It sets the tone for his character. It's brilliant. I think they spend enough time on Austin Butler's character. Javier Bardem is very good in this movie. He's good in everything he does, in my opinion. It's just there for Javier. It's just there. It's there for Javier. I love the central conflict in this movie, where Part 1 was kind of lacking a central conflict, sorta, right? It was just like telling you events, giving you information. The conflict was there, here, and you know, you can kind of tell that Part 1 movie now, looking back on it, was definitely leading up to this, because the central conflict in this one is probably my favorite part of the whole movie. The conflict is self versus self. It's Timothée Chalamet's character Paul, and his struggle for revenge and his love for his new people, right? And his moral character and judgment, and the love he has for Zendaya's character. The battle between that in this movie, I think they do pretty well. Pretty well. There's a couple things I would change, but we'll get into that in the cons. I think in the second half of the movie, Timothée Chalamet and Zendaya's characters really pierced through the story. I think the first half of the movie was kind of when it comes to that. We'll get into that in the cons, but when it hits its stride in this movie, the central conflict, the central main plot point in this movie is really, really good. Really good. The decay of Timothée Chalamet's character, Paul, it gives me the Anakin to Darth Vader feel. It just gives me that Anakin to Darth Vader feel. It does. It is the decay of one's moral compass. How revenge and hatred can just take over you, even while you're fighting against it as hard as you can. I think Timothée Chalamet did the best that he can, and I'll get to more of that in the cons as well. A lot of people are gonna hate me for my take on that, I think, but the character's written very well. Very, very well. And the last thing I just want to say, there was a moment in the movie, I'm not gonna say what, because I don't want to give anything away. There's a plot twist. My jaw physically dropped. I wrote in my notes right here, I'm not making any sense, movie is too good, and after that point, I stopped writing notes. With that being said, there are some cons, let's get into it. Alright, so this is not going to be the fun part, but there are cons. The first con being, I think the casting in this Dune franchise, I'm not a fan of it. I'm not a fan of the casting, okay? I don't think Timothée Chalamet, I don't think he's the best fit for this role. I find him being a little too, physically too skinny, and characterally too non-masculine. I think this role needs to be a real strong presence, a real strong leader, because especially in this movie. In the first movie, it kind of worked, I think, but for him not to add any kind of muscle or have his voice, not get to that depths of deepness you need when he gets when his character arc goes over the arc. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. You can tell even in the movie they added bass to his voice, and I'm not talking about the ones where he's like getting. I'm not gonna try to spoil anything, but there's multiple times in the movie, in the second half of the movie, where he is intense, and I think those parts are shaky because you can tell that they literally added bass to his voice to make him sound more masculine, more aggressive, more in your face, intense. And I think the casting of him is just for kind of the sort of fame, you know what I mean? Like they casted him and Zendaya for a huge part of it being the fame that they had, and it would bring viewers in. Another casting issue I have is Christopher Walken in this movie. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. In the first 2.5 hours of this movie, Christopher Walken's character takes me out of it. He does. Every single time he's in the scene, his northern accent just pierces through, and I'm just like, oh, we're in New York. We're up in the Northeast. You know what I mean? So I don't know if he's from Boston or New York. I don't know. It's so thick that it pierces through and it takes me out of the movie because I've seen him in so many things. He's a very memeable actor because of his voice, and he's so people have impersonated him so many times. I get that you're trying to get people to come watch the movie, but his casting thing, I'm not the biggest fan of Zendaya, okay? And I know people are just like, what are you talking about? I'm not a huge fan of Zendaya playing these kind of stiff roles. Stiff roles that I think her niche right now is playing these stiff, monotoned, kind of hard-nosed characters that kind of lighten up. In the Spider-Man MCU trilogy, she plays that similar character as well. I think she did okay. There's just moments between her and Timothée Chalamet that I'm not a huge fan of. Not a huge fan of, and I think that could be a little to do with writing, but I think it's a majority a casting thing. If you casted just people that fit the role the best, if you casted people, maybe even no-name actors, I know people wouldn't go see it as much, but I think it would be a better movie if you casted the right people for the right roles. I don't know. That's just me. I think Josh Brolin's character, this isn't really a casting thing. I think Josh Brolin casting is perfect for that role. I think in this movie in particular, though, this is another con for me, is that he gets introduced way too late in the movie, and he might get introduced way late in the book, but I guarantee you the book spent way more time on his character arc. It just seemed like at one point he was like, we got to use these people to get revenge, kind of like where Timothy is coming from. And then all of a sudden he's worshiping, I think his nephew or something. He's just like his father's friend's son. He's already worshiping him by the time the movie's not even up yet. It's like we've seen him for an hour or less than an hour, and he's gone from being questionable about why they're believing in Timothy to then absolutely worshiping him at the end. And it just comes out of nowhere. I don't feel like it's deserved. It's like, that's all it took for you to worship him? What's going on here? I don't know. I feel like they needed to spend more time at the beginning with Josh Brolin's character. I don't really know his name in the movie, but I think they needed to spend more time on him. Maybe introduce him a little earlier. I don't know. But the biggest con for me in this movie, the romance between Paul and Johnny, Timothy and Zendaya's character, isn't deserved. It's not deserved one bit. They met in the final 10 minutes, barely spoke a word to each other in part 1. And in the first 30 to 45 minutes, started kissing. Out of nowhere. I get it from sort of Paul's character because he had visions of her the whole time, but why is all of a sudden you're already kissing him and falling in love with him? I don't know. They definitely skipped some shit. Let's just be real. To save time in the movie, they skipped over a large portion of the beginning of this movie. And it's important to focus on the beginning parts of movies, the exposition, so we actually give a fuck about characters in movies. This did not spend enough time. It did not spend enough time on characters we needed to care about at the end, because the main whole conflict is them two, Timothée Chalamet's character Paul and Zendaya's character Johnny. Those two are the most important two characters in this movie, and you spent 30 to 45 minutes, and some of those minutes are for Rebecca Ferguson's character. Some of those minutes, it's really honestly probably maybe 15 to 20 minutes of screen time of these two actually connecting. And then we're supposed to care about them at the end? We're supposed to be like, oh no, why is this happening? Because at the end there's a path chosen by Paul, Timothée Chalamet's character. A path chosen that is probably not what the audience wanted to be chosen. And it is less shocking, less heartfelt, no tear left my eye, not even close, because you didn't spend enough time at the beginning for me to give a fuck about these two characters. Because the central conflict is Timothée Chalamet's character being conflicted in himself, whether he wants revenge for his father and power that these people are giving him, or the love he has now found with Zendaya's character. And to me, the easy choice, because you spend a whole 3.5 hour movie in part 1 showing the relationship between him and his father and how he died, to now only spending 15-20 minutes on Zendaya's character and him, I found it a little undeserved, a little quick, and a little rushed at the beginning at moments. And so that's why it's not going to be a 10 out of 10 movie today. I'm gonna keep it a buck with you. It's not going to be a 10 out of 10 movie today, but it's pretty darn close. So, my overview of this movie. There are definitely way more pros than cons. I think I only had 3 cons. Casting, and really only 2 cons. Casting and then time on character development. That's really the only 2 cons I have. Everything else was near perfection in this movie. Cinematography, the way it sounded, the sound production, the world building, most of the acting. It is that good. It's that good. With that being said, I give this movie, Dune Part 2, a 9.1 out of 10. The best rating I've given a movie on this channel. By far, actually. I think the nearest one is like a 7.5-ish area. This has been my review of Dune Part 2. Before you leave, don't forget to like the video if you liked it, and if you like this sort of content, make sure you subscribe down below. It would mean the world to me. See you guys in the next one.